Hello everyone, I'm Zahid from Talks at Innovation Valley podcast show, and today we have very special and very amazing guest, John Robichaux. John Robichaux is an award-winning consultant, advisor, and speaker who has spent more than 25 years training and advising leaders in government, industry, and philanthropy on a range of critical issues. A graduate of Harvard University today, John specializes in helping high impact organizations through periods of rapid change and strategic development. Among his recent projects, John helped Stanford University launch its flagship research policy and education institute for human centered artificial intelligence. So, I really warm welcome you, John, to the show.
Good. We're thrilled to be here today, Zahid, and excited to talk with you in the audience. It's a really important topic, and obviously one that these days. So, looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, John. And today we will be talking on the topic human centered artificial intelligence and its impact on the future of education, work, and society. So, uh, John, before we jump to the questions, I would love my audience to know about little bit about all your journey. I mean, although I have already told you a little bit of your, I mean, biography or your introduction, but I would love to know a little bit more about your schooling, your education, your early life, and how you got to this point.
Sure. I love, and again, thrilled to help folks think through this interesting topic around human-centered artificial intelligence. By way of background, I think what's most in coming up here on about 30 years where I've been fortunate enough to work with leaders in government, in industry, in philanthropy and nonprofits around critical issues that are, on top of their mind, given the questions of the day. So a lot of consulting and advising, as you rightly mentioned. Um, Part of the background too, though, is has really allowed me to work inside top universities. So I've held leadership positions at Harvard, at Stanford, worked on projects at MIT and elsewhere, and in those roles, been very fortunate to be thinking both about critical issues, again, that executives and current leaders need to be on top of: sustainability, immigration, changing economic environments, obviously questions of emerging tech and artificial intelligence, like we'll be talking about today. I've had the ability to both teach in those areas for executives, government leaders, Nobel laureates, and the like, but also help train the leaders of tomorrow. Those top universities, of course, you get some of the best minds in the world coming through our doors on a regular basis. And so it's been a real privilege. For me to be in those environments on a regular basis. And I think, by way of background, it's probably worth mentioning that it's particularly meaningful for me as someone who grew up in a very poor environment, rural, poor, family farm, grew up really relying on government assistance to get the food that our family needed, had a parent who was homeless for a time. And so, for me, it was really through the power of education, through my studies at Harvard University, that really helped me leave that impoverished state and enter a world in which I could give back. And so a lot of my work has also been focused on helping philanthropies and nonprofits and other civil society organizations think about how we can better the life outcomes for the global majority. So international issues around human rights, around global development, as well as more specific topics in education, in social services, and the like as well. So a lot of my work, I tend to focus on social impact questions, in addition to helping leaders in government and industry as well, and reminding them too of their global and their social missions. So this question of human-centered artificial intelligence, I think, continues that thread. And it's the question of artificial intelligence and the human-centeredness of it is not something that we've talked about for a very long time. In fact, I've been teaching in one way or another topics around AI and automation and related technologies for almost 15 years. And it's only in the past 5, 7, 8 that this term human-centered AI has really come to the fore and been part of our thinking going ahead. So a life journey that's pretty extraordinary, a real privilege to be in this moment, helping leaders, global leaders, really help shape the future, impact lives, and with a real central core here that's a social, pro-social and social driven mission to help improve life outcomes across the world where possible.
Right. John, how would you define human centered artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a great question to start out with. It's a term that, like I said, is relatively new in the field, and right now we're seeing a lot of organizations come up and start to use the term, and in large part, or no small part at least, thanks to the work that we undertook at Stanford HAI. So when talking about human-centered AI, there are really three models that I want people to be thinking about, because you'll hear each, and I really think it's the third one that's the most important, and where we're pushing people to be thinking more and more as we look ahead into the future. So the first, many of your audience will probably recognize, is analogous to human-centered design, where AI, you could design AIs just thinking about optimizing around certain outcomes or certain aims that you teach the model to perform around. But what we find is that when you engage with human-centered designs around AI, you have to put at the center how it is that humans are going to interact with that AI. So many of your audience will probably be familiar with the automated vehicle revolution and how we're thinking about driverless vehicles. So you will know that there are some who advocate for driverless vehicles that should never be put on the road until they're fully autonomous. And then there are some who say, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of AI technology that can help get us to semi-autonomous vehicles. But the problem with semi-autonomous vehicles, of course, is that they require human interaction. And as you probably know, Zaid, and others, that human interaction is the place where those AI human systems often fail. So in this line of thinking about human-centered AI, there's a way of saying, if you're going to involve humans in the loop around your AI system, you better be thinking about how human interaction is central to that piece. So human-centered design around AI changes the way you think about designing an AI system. I'll give one example from robotics. We all know that the quickest path between 2 points is a straight line. Well, in robotics, if you teach a robot to go straight to an object it wants to grasp, and there are humans that are watching this, it's actually hard for the human to understand what it is that the robot arm is looking to grasp. And so what we do is we teach the robot actually to come with more of a side sweeping motion that feels more natural to humans. And so in this way of thinking about human-centered AI or human-centered design at the center of AI, you're recognizing that humans engaging with AI changes the way you would design the system. So that's one approach. Very simple, should be familiar to those who think about design thinking, and how design thinking is one school, and then human-centered design really puts humans at the center. Second approach we've heard a lot about in the past 5 years. This is an approach that really emphasizes multi-stakeholders in a given system. So this will be associated with those AI for good movements, AI ethics approaches, AI within a community setting. And in fact, it's where we started often thinking about human-centered AI when we launched Stanford HAI in 2019. So I'll give one research example. In the United States, there are more people who die every year from infections gained or encountered or acquired within a hospital or clinical setting than there are those who die within car accidents. And so the spreading of infections in a clinical environment is really important for saving lives. And so there's a research team that involved some AI researchers who are looking at this problem and wanting to help hospitals, wash their hands more regularly, keep down infections to save lives. AI for good ethical approach and use of AI. They had a decision tree where they could use one type of sensor, which would do the job, but while they were talking to the different people who were involved in this research project and who were in the hospital, the workers who would actually be observed, because they engaged multi-stakeholders across this local system, what they learned was that this type of sensor that they might have used, A, was actually one that came with a lot of privacy concerns and made the workers nervous. And so they went back to the drawing board, to the lab, and decided to go with a different type of sensor, which maintained the privacy of individuals, but helped still achieve the end of improving the hand washing and reducing infections within the system. So in this view of human-centered AI, because you talked to different people who were going to be impacted by the AI system, you changed your approach. You had one type of approach that you preferred over the other. Multi-stakeholders helped you get there. The third approach, though, is the approach that we're more talking about these days. And it's advocated by a few folks, but I'm going to associate it with Professor James Landay at Stanford University. And what he does is he takes the insights of those two other understandings of human-centered AI, and he helps us push it even further. And he says, really what you need to be thinking about when we talk about human-centered AI are three levels. That AI engages end-user considerations. So I'll use the autonomous driving example again. This would be your drivers and your passengers. So when you're developing an AI system, first you're thinking about end-user considerations, your drivers, your passengers, and the like. But two, you're also needing to think about those community considerations that the multi-stakeholder approach really emphasized. So you got to start thinking about your pedestrians on the road. You may actually want to redesign your cities or your neighborhoods or your roads. And then he adds a third level. Really, we also need to be thinking about deploying AI systems and when their impact on broader environments, broad social considerations, national, international, environmental considerations. So in the autonomous vehicle example, if we end up in a world dominated by autonomous vehicles, we're going to require a lot of chips or a lot of components of the AI technology that's going to impact mining, that's going to impact government policy, international trade, treaties, and the like. And so on this third view, and I think probably the most useful view of what human-centered AI is it takes into consideration all three of those levels: the end user, the individuals who are closest to the technology, the community and regional impacts that are, just that next level out that the multi-stakeholder approach really tried to emphasize, and then elevates it to that third level of broad social, national, international, environmental considerations that we have to be considering as we're entering this age of AI. And so today, I think, when we're looking at that as our core definition, and a driving definition, and one that I think is particularly helpful, you can see how it also will impact a lot of different ways, a lot of different conversations around AI in technology circles and outside of technology circles. It will impact leaders in government, in industry, in nonprofit and philanthropy. It will impact us as citizens as well. So I think that's a more comprehensive approach. And look, we're early in using this term. It's likely that definition is going to change a few more times over the next few years. But for now, that's the way we're starting to think about human-centered AI.
John, how AI could be used to improve education, work, and society? And can you give some examples? And also, I would add one more question with the quick answer. Uh, you know that many people are afraid of AI, and there are many questions that are raised nowadays, like AI will replace this role, AI will replace that role, AI will replace human being. So, do you think that AI has a dark side too, or should we say the right question is that AI is neither good or bad, but actually the usage of the AI is good or bad?
Yeah, good. Okay, so I'm very grateful for this question. So firstly, I want to be very clear on this. Artificial intelligence and related technologies have the potential to do incredibly positive things within society, and then the specific areas you mentioned, education, work, and so on. It also does have the possibility to enact some real dangerous outcomes. And so a large part of our work, and certainly a large part of my work, is to help leaders understand where AI could really be pushing on the positive outcomes, where we're likely to see, harms or negative outcomes. Understand that there are going to be other places where we see goods and we see bad outcomes that we don't yet know or can't even imagine yet. And so be ever evolving in our approaches and uses of AI. And so I'm pretty clearly within the tool camp, what you might call the tool camp, where I see AI as a powerful tool, one that can do a lot of good, one that can do a lot of harm. And so our tasks, and especially the tasks of this generation, we who are in positions of leadership at this moment where the age of AI is being born, that we have a unique responsibility within human history to make sure that we're getting the positive outcomes of AI right, minimizing the harms wherever possible, and then being clear that we're going to miss some, and we're going to make some bad decisions going along the way. But we've got some real choices and a powerful moment of historic responsibility to humans, to the world we live in. And so, yeah, the both ends of that spectrum, I think, have legitimate arguments to make. Zaid, I think you asked me specifically about education, work, and society. Maybe I'll say a word about those as well. Some of the places where I see, the positive outcomes, in particular, which is where you led the question. If that's all right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's great. So I think on the positive side, look, there's an extraordinary list, and it's undoubtedly a list that's going to continue to grow as technologies are rolled out and human creativity takes over. I'm a powerful believer in human creativity here, and again, for good and for ill. So you need to watch that. But in society, you can imagine that even what we're seeing right now in this moment, where generative AI technologies are all the rage or in top of people's minds, what we're seeing is a world, the beginnings of a world where we're really able to unleash creativity in ways that perhaps we've never seen before within human society. So whether it's the impacts on arts or music or gaming or product development in industries, that low and no code environments, using generative AI as a thought partner or a creative inspiration or a tool to help encode your idea because you're the ideas person, you're not necessarily the technologist. That marriage of human creativity and AI tools in a low or no code environment or as generative models of AI, that's really a world in which, creativity may be the limits of our really just pushing the limits of our imagination at that stage. And so it's hard to find a good analogy in history to this moment about what is going to be possible in the next 10, 15 years and what is even possible today around unleashing creativity. So I really want to emphasize that that one of our defining features as humans is this imagination, is this creativity, and it's going to be amplified through the powers of AI. Secondly, and I think you emphasized this in your question here, that work is going to change in a lot of different ways. So unlike those who really think about replacing, AI replacing humans in jobs, that, by the way, is likely to happen in some places, undoubtedly, as all automation transformations have. But what we tend to think from our viewpoint today is that AI is mostly going to be a complementary or an augmenting type of toolkit for us and for workers and in the work environment, that we're likely to see replacement of some jobs, yes, but more often we're going to see replacement of pieces of jobs. And so the jobs that'll take priority going ahead will be those jobs and those skill sets for those who are able to work with AI tools, and those are most likely to replace jobs and individuals who don't work with AI tools and systems in the aggregate. There will always be some jobs that don't require AI, of course. And so, firstly, realize that it's probably, a revolution around pieces of jobs, A. And then B, what I also want to emphasize, because right now we're in this moment where generative AI, ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E are getting a lot of the attention. I also want to put in a good word for a more traditional type of artificial intelligence, which looks more like machine learning and is more specific or narrow in its approach. Those types of AIs today are having enormous impacts. So if you fly a commercial plane anywhere in the world today, your plane is carrying a collision avoidance system based in AI, a very hyper-specific, precision, hyper-safe AI. It's different from these generative AI models where we're hearing about the hallucinations and the errors that they have. In the more traditional, narrow, optimized, precision-based AI, we can achieve extraordinary levels of safety and compliance and effectiveness. Similarly, today, industry, we're seeing that there's an enormous use of AI to help bring down billions of dollars of costs in routine maintenance, mundane things like when to repair the tractor or your company's car fleet, and how to get ahead of those maintenance requests so that over the course of 10 years, you're saving many billions of dollars. So today, again, we're thinking a lot about the impacts of generative AI and those big models, and we're seeing a lot of those dangers. But I don't want us to forget that we still have this incredible toolkit around precision AI and hyper-safe AI that does a much more narrow set of tasks, but can be extraordinarily effective for improving outcomes, for saving dollars, saving lives, and it's going to probably have as much, if not more, impact for the foreseeable future. And those generative AIs and those big models may get to something more impactful down the road, and I think we should expect that. But for the foreseeable future, I want to remember the smaller bucket as well. Okay, I'll pause there. There's so much more to say, of course, but I know we've got other topics to move on to.
No problem. We have a lot of time. I mean, because your conversation is very, very insightful and very, very relevant to the topic. So, John, as an advisor, as a consultant, as a researcher, as a professor, and a lot of more roles you have a particular vision how you want to, apply in multiple sectors and across the industry. So, when you think of the implementation of AI, what challenges do you see? For example, it could be around government, infrastructure, or the mindset of the society, or many, many more challenges.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad you asked that. We could probably do we could do hours upon hours of conversation just on the challenges. Let me just highlight a couple here that I think are particularly salient. One is one that we actually talked a great deal about at Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence during my time there, and we're still the folks who were there are still actively engaged in trying to resolve this problem. First is that the most advanced AIs today, AI technologies, AI capabilities, the cutting edge of AI research and development is really in the hands of a very few enormous entities, most often private companies. And this means that their interests are primarily profit generating. Now, look, I advise industry all the time, right? I have no concerns about profit generation in the aggregate. We obviously have specific concerns about distribution inequalities, making sure it's done ethically, that there's a fairness question within society. We understand those limitations, but profit generating improves human outcomes in the aggregate, or can. And yet, AI technologies are so potentially powerful in their transformative nature that if they were only developed along profit-generating, incentive-based interests, then we're probably missing a huge piece of the potential here for AIs to do good and to reduce harms. So at Stanford, we promoted within the United States a vision of a national research cloud, which would allow top universities and middle-sized universities, and maybe even some K-12 and some elementary and some secondary schools to have access to AI technologies for a much broader range of interests. I view, something like a public computer or opening up the AI, the AI doors, to public interest technology. So you've got nonprofits and philanthropies that can do incredible things with artificial intelligence, from helping identify human traffickers, so saving women and children who are captured in the modern slave movement, to helping identify, contact tracing through the COVID pandemic, to helping, low-income countries identify where schools and clinics are in local neighborhoods, because those things aren't recorded in some government ledgers where you've got lower income, or the government systems aren't as robust as they are in Europe and North America and other wealthy countries. And so there's this huge public interest AI sector and incentives and interests that if we only allow AI to be developed by a few really wealthy corporations and maybe a couple of really advanced governments, that narrow interest set is going to miss a huge part of the potential good that AI can do and the harms that it can help reduce. So I'm a strong advocate in terms of one of the challenges here for implementing a human-centered AI is to ensure that we are, setting aside revenues, whether through governments or through philanthropy or other channels, to ensure that public interest AI is robust and not just an afterthought. So that's one. That's a big one. I think too that you flagged that there are some real dangers. There are going to be some stumbles and some bad examples of AI that are going to be rolled out or released into the wild here, certainly we can expect over the next few years. And so, the challenges in implementing a human-centered AI are going to be that those types of not just the immediate impact of those negative outcomes or those badly designed models that are released into the wild and the damage they're going to do, but that's also has the potential to redound and really paint AI with a negative brushstroke. Again, you heard me say we need to have a healthy respect for the power of the tool, but if we let the negative examples rule the day, one of the challenges will be that we're going to have a negative backlash against the good possibilities that AI can yet unleash. So I think one of the things we need is rigorous benchmarking or rigorous testing of really powerful models, especially models that are going to be released into high impact areas. And so, one of the projects that Stanford has also engaged in through their Center on Research for Foundation Models is a major benchmarking exercise around these large language and large generative AI models to benchmark, to engage in rigorous testing to determine where are we seeing models that are more biased or less safe versus more safe, more accurate in their outcomes, more effective in their intentions, and really scoring them on different levels across a number of different metrics so that policymakers, so that users, so that leaders in industry and philanthropy can look at an unbiased set of benchmarks and testing and say, all right, this model does really great on its outcome and performance, its effectiveness, but it's really bad on bias. And so maybe we don't use that. Maybe we either need to improve it on bias before we release it into the wild, or we go to another model that's slightly less effective, and we're okay with that give if it's less biased and treats people more equally across a number of sectors that we care, or dimensions that we care about. So that rigorous testing and benchmarking, I think, is something that's just now coming online for the large models, and that's going to be really critical. And finally, I think what I'd also say is I think we need to, there's something about this moment of AI that wasn't the case, say, 5 years ago, where the large models of AI that are dominating today and dominating our conversation, many of them are so-called black box AIs, where we don't know how they come to certain decisions or certain outcomes or outputs along the way. We can't describe that. We set them off on large data sets. We allow the model to learn, and then they come back with properties we didn't expect, right? So they've got emergent properties that you may have heard about. That creates an interesting environment for us because there are many places in our society that we've organized around understanding why something works and feeling like it's really important for outcomes or decisions to be explainable to humans. The current cutting edge of AI doesn't allow for a lot of quality explanation. And so I think, there's a real question around how do we address that? So one model that some of us are looking hard at right now is a model in medicine, let's say, where the benchmark ends up being: is it safe? Is it effective? And then does it avoid the major concerns around bias and the our positive interest in fairness? And so using that safe and effective terminology that we've long used within medicine may actually end up being more important to us in the long term than some of our prior thinking, even the past 10 years, where we thought that AI models needed to be explainable in the end, that we need to understand why they come to decisions or how they come to decisions. I think we're probably past that point now. And so I've been pushing folks to really think that one of the major challenges for this next phase for us is to think about the regulatory environment where we currently expect explanation. Sometimes that's medicine, sometimes that's financial institutions and the like. And to think, I use the Tylenol example or the acetaminophen example within medicine. We've long known that acetaminophen is safe and effective for most of the population. And we've got theories about how it works, but we also don't know how it works. And so it's a good example, a good metaphor to use, when we talk about we've got a medicine that we know is safe and effective for most people, but we also don't have a great explanation for why it works. And so as in this phase of AI looking ahead, we probably need to make room for something like that, where we don't understand why the AI is working or coming to the right or the safe outcomes, but that it's safe and that it's effective is good enough. And then we'll have to decide in what arenas that's acceptable and what arenas that's not acceptable. And then that'll impact the way we think about and develop AI going ahead as well. So there's some real choices we're going to be having to make, which is another reason why I say this generation, we in leadership today, have a real power and a real sense of responsibility that few other generations will ever have.
Right. John, you mentioned that I do agree that before implementing the AI solutions and AI tools, definitely that could be assessed, and the government needs to decide, and the things should be regulated and test before it is implemented, that is it really safe for the society or not. I would extend that thing a little bit with my upcoming question. The question is, how can we ensure that AI algorithms are ethical and unbiased?
Yeah, good. I'm so glad for this question. So this is something that we think about a lot. And you heard my background, right? I mean, I teach ethics and international relations, ethics and leadership. I've done a lot of work around rooting out bias, conscious and unconscious, and systematic bias. And so this is something that's really important to me as a leader and somebody who advises leaders and who leads his own organizations throughout time. So a few things that are probably most important to set the stage here. First, there are going to be some clear, or what we would consider more clear, cases. So many have heard about some clear cases concerning bias in certain AI algorithms that try and screen for cancer on the skin, but that do worse with darker skin tones, or AI facial recognition technologies that have done a poor job of recognizing women or people of color. Those, I think, are pretty clear cases where you need to fix the algorithm. You go back, you make sure that you take that testing that I was just describing. You ensure that you've rooted out a lot of the bias and the complications where they're clear. But I think the problem is, and this is something that I remind leaders of all the time, that the more complicated cases, however, are the ones that are not actually going to be solved by the technologists. Those are going to be solved. Most of the gray area cases are going to be solved by those who create the policies. That might be people in government. It might be within the organization, the company, or the nonprofit, or the team developing the tool. And so the most critical questions for ethical AI, for unbiased AI, are not actually technological questions. They end up being questions that are non-technological, and then they end up being choices that we ask the technologists to then go ahead and advance or solve for. So, famous example, Princeton computer science professor, wanted to teach on the question of fairness within AI. Many of us a couple years ago were really concerned. We're still concerned, but a couple years ago it was a very hot topic. How do we make sure that AIs are fair? So it's an ethical principle, it's an unbiased principle, the fairness principle. Well, he writes a 2-pager and then ultimately a talk that identifies 21 different definitions of fairness. 21 different definitions of fairness. So you can't say to an AI, developer or a technologist or a coder, hey, go develop a fair AI. That doesn't work. You've got to look at the 21 definitions, let's say, in this example, and there are probably others that we can come up with. And there's some, your list might be, more or less than 21. But you look at your list and you say, there are real choices to be made here. So I'll give another example that some of you may have heard, that you and some of your audience may have heard about. And that's the example of the AI doing a not great job about being fair or unbiased within parole recommendations in the United States. So a couple places in the United States deployed some AI models to help judges determine whether or not they should give somebody who's up for parole, yes, a positive judgment, yes, you can have parole, or a negative judgment, no, you can't have parole. A few years ago, headlines were all over the place about how a lot of those AI algorithms were treating Black defendants differently from white defendants, let's say, or potential parolees differently. And so there was a real question of looking at the AI. Is the AI being biased or unfair? In one of these examples, what we came up against is a familiar problem to those of us who work in human rights, or those of us who work in law, or those of us who work in anti-discrimination contexts, where the question became, the technologists gave us a few solutions where you could end up with one solution, let's say, or one set of solutions where you would treat the defendants more or less equally, in rendering their data or their characteristics, putting it through the system. But what would happen is on the output side, they would look different. White defendants would get parole more often, Black defendants, less often, et cetera, et cetera. In the other example, you could tweak the system so that the outcomes looked pretty similar, but what ended up happening on this model was that the way they were treated looked pretty different at the front end. And so, those of you who are familiar with anti-discrimination law right now, or human rights questions, you are well familiar with the question of, do you tackle disparate treatment or disparate outcomes? And are you willing to engage in equal treatment if there are disparate outcomes, or suffer through disparate outcomes for purposes, or achieve more equal outcomes while treating folks differently on the front end? That is an ethical choice. That's a choice that we make. And it's not something that the technologist is going to be able to make on their own or in their role as technologists. They can solve for either one of those solutions, let's say, and they often tell us this, the technologists often tell us, hey, look, I can solve for whatever you want on this problem. You need to answer the question, what do you want? Which one of those 21 definitions of fairness do you want to aim for? Do you care more about disparate treatment or disparate outcomes? So here again, the choices that we're making right now in policy, government, corporate, technology, philanthropy, the choices that we're making are going to shape what looks like, what ethical means, what fair means, what unbiased means. And it's not easy. And so the hard questions here really are choices that we're making, and they're complicated questions. And so, to just say, go make an ethical AI is really, misunderstanding just the real world that we live in. And oh, by the way, that's the case with much more than just AI. That's as is the case in so many of the issues that come upon us as top leaders in the world. We've got to look hard at the real complicated matters, and we're making choices along the way. It's not always objective or clear in those gray zones, which is where the real work is.
Right. John, since you know that current education system across the world in many of the countries is not really compatible with the industry, or when we see the speed of change, especially in the technology side, it's too much. I mean, it's so erratic and it's so aggressive. But when we see the education system that has a certain curriculum which is not even changed or upgraded or updated regularly,
Yeah.
so what do you think? How AI could be used to improve the current education system, especially when we talk on the bridge up the skills gap to so that the future workforce could cope with the industry 4.0.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. So, question around AI changing so quickly, and industry, some industry already having a hard time keeping up, but education always having a hard time keeping up, and the ability for it to iterate or move quickly is often hampered. A and B. Then you've got the additional question about workforce training. Do I have that right, Zaid?
Okay, that's right. Go ahead, like that.
Great, great, terrific. So it's a critical question, and I'm so glad. As you know, I work a lot in the education space, advising leaders in education as well. The look, the opportunities within education certainly abound when it comes to AI. So I think the usual suspects many people will think about. Look, you've got individualized tutors, you've got tailored lessons, you've got automated grading and feedback, and that can happen in secondary or primary and secondary schools, to higher education, to workforce trainings. That can apply across the lifelong spectrum. But there is so much more, I think, when we think about AI that we ought to also be thinking about within education. So look, there's opportunities for bias reduction, where AIs can help analyze the language that teachers use, the tone, the interaction between teachers and students in the classroom. There's, helping helping students learn the higher order skills. So right now with ChatGPT, a lot of the teachers that I'm working with to think about how to use in the classroom are thinking about moving to those higher order skills like editing or critical analysis. That you can get to those sooner or easier within your curriculum or within a childhood education. In this case, many folks point to the analogy of the calculator, where you're not doing as much calculation later in math, but you're getting to those higher order skills earlier in the math curriculum. I think I also like to emphasize, that these AIs will allow students to engage in teaching, whether it's teaching other students, creating their own lesson plans, or teaching, these AI agents. And that's important as an educator because, for those of you who don't know, one of the best forms or ways that humans learn is to teach. And so AIs will help the best form of learning that we have, teaching, become even easier. And you'll be able to help students teach other students or agents and the like. And so that will improve learning outcomes. I think another area I'm really excited about is immersion. So we're talking about, with virtual reality, sometimes, people want to use the metaverse term, but let's just think, VR more generally speaking, that there's a real immersion opportunity here to engage in history, to reignite history, to reignite lessons of sustainability, and environmental science and the like. And what we see in the studies around immersion technologies and the AI's ability to power those is that people learn better, they retain more information, they can engage more. Obviously, those of us who are teachers in learning science think about engaging multiple senses. That's a huge moment right now in education across the lifelong spectrum. And then finally, I think I want to emphasize something that maybe a lot of folks aren't thinking about as well, or aren't aware of, but that is really this transformational revolution that we're seeing today within higher education or deep research. So right now, AI has already given us the ability to analyze enormous amounts of data, completely transforming the way that students and researchers can engage in histories, in archaeologies, in public health, in environmental science, and the like. So I'll give one example, or I'll point folks to one example that you'll find in the Stanford HAI on the YouTube channel on February 2023. Look for a session on archaeology, AI and archaeology. What you're going to see there is you're going to see a team of researchers across a wide range of disciplines who have come in, and they started with a question of a particular pandemic from more than 100 years ago on an island. And they used AI to read enormous amounts of data that no human set of researchers could have done on their own. Reading death certificates, reading burial records. They took physical corings of the coral reefs off the island to read information around agricultural practices, put it together with migration patterns and the like. So this enormous range of multiple disciplines coming together with this extraordinary amount of data that no human team, even with hundreds or thousands of researchers, could have possibly crunched together. They used AI in its multimodal forms to read handwriting, to read maps, to look at analysis, mineral analysis, and the like, to create this entirely new historic picture of this particularly important pandemic, which they're now applying today to help us understand how agricultural practices might influence or impact or create opportunities for the next pandemic. And so this is just incredible moment in research around history, around records, that our AI unlocks because of its data crunching potential. And look, right now at top universities, and certainly those that have AI capabilities, I'm expecting us to just continue to see dissertation after dissertation, researcher after researcher, just get pumped out through our programs who are capable of doing this extraordinary research that was simply not possible 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it's going to completely revolutionize the way we think about an enormous range of subjects. I can't even start to name how many are likely to be impacted today. And I think if you were to invite me back here 10 years from now, I think we would be shocked at the number of ways in which the AI data revolution will have transformed even basic things like learning and research within education. And then, of course, you've got the skills training that you're talking, the skills training, that third piece that you threw in there, where, for jobs and skills training, you heard me say that early on, that it's going to be absolutely essential for those of us who are in the workforce to learn how to work with AI and to be prepared for that to change. But you know what? We've gone through several of these in our lifetimes, right? This phone, that I'm holding in my hand today used to be 4 or 5 devices. I never used to be able to pull off a picture of someone, within an image, and plop it into something else. I never used to be able to take that 2D image and then generate something like a 3D image to create a video. These are possibilities that have already been unlocked in our lifetimes, and AI is going to be another piece of that. I just think we have every reason to expect that it's going to be a piece that touches an enormous range of work and job skill sets as well. So huge impact on education, some of which I think folks are not yet aware of. And then, on the skill set front, AI's possibility with personalized education, with the ability to help us learn better, more immersively, learn critical skills and higher order skills earlier. That only points, again, to my first point, which is we are likely to see an enormous unlocking of human creativity and possibilities here going ahead. And yet, human history being what it is, I think we also have every reason to expect and be nervous about those who are going to be left behind. Who's going to be left out of the digital transformation? Whose skill set is not still going to meet the needs of the moment? And so, for government policymakers, as we talk about this AI revolution, we're driving and pushing them hard to think about how it is that you're going to help those whose jobs are displaced, those who can't keep up with the skill sets that are needed here, and recognizing that over the next 2, 3, 4 decades, so say the working lifetime of those who are listening to this podcast, probably you're going to have to, in many cases, have to learn something about AI in your jobs. And yet there will be a segment that won't be touched by AI, because there will always be somebody who needs, there will always be some jobs that won't be touched by AI, and there will always be people who won't be able to keep up. And so governments have to be thinking about that displacement. And go back to that third definition of human-centered AI that I think is the right definition. When we talk about human-centered AI at the social, political, national, international levels, it's really thinking about those people who are going to be left behind, those who are going to be displaced. We have to be taking those systematic realities into account as we develop our AI policies going ahead. And that's a piece that, again, we haven't historically been good at, helping displaced workers. But we've got to be able to get this right. We've had enough failures that I hope right now, we have people who are listening and who are thinking, well about how we're going to ensure that the AI revolution, does maximize its potential for good, and that among the harms we mitigate is a real displacement or job skill loss that we don't want people to get caught up in, where we can stop it.
Right. John, when we talk on the potential of AI and its implementation, how do you see the future of industry and manufacturing?
Yeah, good. So remember earlier I emphasized that right now generative AI is getting a lot of attention, and these large language models and so on, getting a lot of attention. But I don't want people to forget that much of the AI impact is going to be driven by optimized AI, or what we might call big tent AI, what some of our colleagues call big tent AI, where artificial intelligence, machine learning, and its various modalities, computer vision, language, and will be narrower. So narrow AI will be targeted for precision work and for hyper safe work. That's a place where in industry you could see, in industry and development, you could see, already today we know from manufacturing that that's an essential piece of today's high-end manufacturing landscape. A. B, that means on the job front, you're less worried about those who can turn the screw to the screwdriver. You're more worried about those who can support the AI systems and the technology, hardware and software. And then you've got those examples like I was pointing to that are maybe more, for other people will seem more boring. For maybe big thinkers will seem more boring. The routine maintenance question, the question of a smart building turning, lights on or off or cooling at the right kind of temperature and the like. And yet for operations and for business leaders are absolutely essential, because you can gain huge percentages or huge amounts of dollars back from your expense side of the ledger by improving your systems, your operations, and the like. And so narrow AI is a place where we're currently seeing huge gains based on AI, some of which are more familiar, robotic arms, some of which are less familiar, routine maintenance, some of which are likely still to come on the smart buildings and sensors front, for example. And we can only expect that to improve and continue to gain efficiencies. And when you're gaining efficiencies, you're saving dollars, you're changing jobs, you're improving financial outcomes there and possibilities for economic benefit to be more broadly shared as well. So a lot of incredible and interesting work happening in that world too.
Are you getting me?
I did not hear the last thing. If you said anything, it was a big silence on my end.
Oh, I think I did not say anything. Actually, I was waiting if you wanted to say something more. So I have the next question, John. Are you getting me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm
Perfect.
hearing you now. Thank you.
So, John, you know that yes, AI has a lot of potential and it could do a lot of things. But you know that right now, millions of students are out of school across the world. I guess around 300 million students are out of school. So when we talk about the underprivileged communities around the globe, uh, particularly with reference to the education, what role do you think AI and technology could play to solve this problem, which is, mm, out of school children or the people who don't have access to the education?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a few things. One is, let's be clear, AI is not going to be the silver bullet here. in order for a good AI to work, where AI has the most potential in this space, seems to be through things like individualized education, personalized tutors, the AI agent, which they're not there yet. The AI agent able to teach a student where they're at. Those agents are being developed. There's a huge industry within education technology to try and solve that problem. However, the concurrent problems that are going to make that equally difficult. The absence of internet connectivity will hamper some of that. The absence of certain devices, whether it's a tablet or an affordable laptop computer device on which to run the particular agent. The problems around work and communities even if where those pockets of individuals are that are out of school and out of school and don't have access to education, finding ways for them to get access to it without without funding, without public education infrastructure that's well in place. That's a bigger problem than merely AI. You can see how AI has the potential to help individuals, but I'm also nervous because here in the United States and elsewhere, what we've seen is those individualized education plans through online education, through automated grading and the like, early on, and when I say early on here, I mean sort of the past 3-4 decades, what we've seen is a lot of those benefits have gone to the wealthy. It has the tool set, and in theory, where it might be able to help those who are underserved and those who are low resourced. However, the reality has been that those who are wealthier have ended up benefiting more. We saw this supercharged during the height of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns and the online education. And so in the online education splintering and fork in the road that we've seen from wealthier, well-to-do families and those who are less well-to-do. And so when I point here to AI, again, I point to the possibilities, but I'm very cognizant that you've got a huge set of issues that are not AI driven: the tablet, the internet connectivity, the infrastructure to public education, the access to getting in front of such an AI that might be helpful. I'm cognizant of that constellation of problems, and I'm cognizant and worried about the history that we have seen, even the recent history, where those who are underserved, underprivileged, under-resourced are also left out or don't fare as well for a variety of reasons that folks are currently researching, very quickly, trying to figure out answers to. So, there are a lot of people working on this space within education technology. There's a lot of nonprofits and philanthropic interest in trying to solve this problem. I think some governments will be helpful, but as you know, international aid is not the silver bullet that many people wish it were, or who think it is. Not realizing just how little international aid a lot of governments, including the United States, tend to give relative to their percentage-wise versus their wealth. And so, when I look at this, I see possibilities, I see real challenges, and I'm afraid that currently I really do see that our best hopes right now are in the philanthropic space and the nonprofit civil society space. But that's not a great answer, right? And so this is why I continue to push with leaders in government, international leaders in government, to be thinking about how it is that we can help on the infrastructure questions more broadly as well. And there's always politics involved when you get to that level, and so you're going to see some projects that are doing well, but they tend to be smaller right now. I'd like to see some big scale projects, and certainly as I look ahead, to the global majority, the populations in Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, where the populations are booming, we need access to these resources. And demographically speaking, it's going to be the most important generation, globally speaking, for the next 100 years. So I think solving that problem is a key one, but I do recognize that there's a huge challenge ahead of us, and I'd like to see more investment and more attention paid to that. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
All right, John, that when we talk on the education delivery, no matter how much the education model is AI based, but keeping in view how the humans like to learn, that nowadays a lot of models are there. I mean, there is a recorded online model, there is online live teaching model,
Yeah.
there is like uh, you know already an old model which is on campus live teacher model.
Yeah.
So keeping in view the emerging technologies and the new challenges nowadays, uh, what do you think, which model is the most effective for the education delivery, where we could also use the technologies and AI,
Hmm.
and keeping it
Yeah.
still balanced for the best learning?
No, it's a great question, and I think the coming out of the pandemic lockdowns in particular, we're just getting an enormous amount of data and research coming out, around the past, 3 5 years here, that are telling us that right now the current models of online clearly don't work for the majority. And so now, how do you respond to that? There are a couple of responses that we're seeing. We're seeing, certain AI technologists push further and say, well, let's refine the online models, let's say, um, to improve them. And then you've got others who are saying, well, see, human interaction or in person really is the answer here. I'm not, I'm more in the camp of, there are going to be pieces that work for different pieces that work for different learners. I think we can see this that some students really do thrive in an online world. Frankly, when connect it from education and work, it's also the case that a lot of jobs and workers will continue to be solo or live in an environment where live and work in an environment where there's not a lot of human interaction. So that's the question of the work from home versus being in the office as well. So we're seeing it both in work and in education, this push and this pull. I think where I'm particularly concerned on the education front, and I want to make sure we don't lose, is the social emotional learning, especially of young learners. That where emerging technologies can help ensure that students are getting, learning about social cues, are learning about, resilience, are learning about empathy, those social and emotional things that we currently put a lot of stock in the in-person interactions, that if those end up being lost in the online or the automated environments, then I think that's a real red flag and a danger for all of us to be watching out for. So look, for those who are working on automated forms of education, online, AI, or otherwise, that's a world that they have in mind too, right? And so more and more we're seeing people pushing and trying to resolve, can you teach social and emotional parts of the curriculum in an asynchronous or in a hybrid environment? And so it's those youngest learners I'm most worried about within education on that social and emotional learning front, recognizing that within that you've got the bigger problem that, or you got the bigger question set that some students will thrive in online or asynchronous or automated environments, and that's great. If they're thriving, let's ensure that they're learning and that they continue to thrive and they can push their talent, as far as they're capable. But darn, I don't want to be leaving a lot of other students behind, by cutting out in person or real time learning together. And I think it would be irresponsible that. So I'm, in the category here of allowing a variety of modalities, and ensuring that students have the ability, to thrive. A, B, I'm particularly concerned about the social and emotional learning pieces of of development. I think through young students and through adolescents, and then on the work environment, this is a whole nother thing that we're about with lead industry and government right now, is this question about work from home versus hybrid versus fully in person. When's it best to do what? And again, you're seeing a complicated picture where some industries, in some job types, it matters more to be in person, say creativity, but being in person is also a place where you get a lot of distractions and lost time and inefficiencies. And so, but when you look within the next level of data, you'll see things like younger workers might be losing out on mentorship through online and through hybrid. And they might be losing out on good feedback early in their career in a way that maybe long-term we need to watch a little bit about. We need to watch a little more carefully, excuse me. And let me say this. This is coming from someone who's had very high functioning teams who've been 100% remote. Someone who really believes, I do believe in the power and the possibility of global teams working together online synchronously and asynchronously. And yet I want to be clear, just as with where we started with AI, I want to be clear that where there's potential, there's also downside risks. And so watching those downside risks to make sure that, workers who need that mentorship, who need that feedback, and who might not be getting it, in the online or the hybrid environments, are also getting it too. And so like the students, young students, there's a complicated picture among workers as well to be watching. And so, the research that we're seeing come out right now is telling some interesting stories, and it's probably the thing that it's one of the things I'm consulting the most on these days as well, because the picture is so complicated and folks want to get it right. But I don't think we have a single answer at this moment. And what we're finding is different populations, whether age or demographic or wealth levels, are finding different paths to success and different danger points in this new complicated world we're living in. And so for us as leaders, we're constantly having to look and make some choices about where we're going to put our emphasis, how we're going to structure our education, our work environment, our mentorship, et cetera, et cetera. So really complicated picture right now. So this is a space we all ought to be watching over the next 5-10 years as well.
Right, John. This is for sure that AI is going to do the wonders across every industry. This is for sure. Keeping in view this, how can we educate the next generation about AI and its potential impact on the society, especially two people, the one learner and the second educator?
Yeah, good. So I think, in terms of educating the next generation about AI and its potential impacts on society, learners and teachers, I think first of all, programs like these are really important. So I want to thank you for highlighting this topic, Zahid, in what is a really, influential and wide-reaching podcast. The fact that this is made available free, right? That's really important. HAI, at Stanford, we made much of our programming free and online to the public for this very reason, that we view educating this next generation as absolutely essential to the work that we're doing, and important for us as citizens. Other types of projects are also taking shape right now. So recently I've been working with, a Stanford education professor, Victor Lee, and he's been working on modules about AI for teachers and for students in the high school space, with our intent to be thinking, beyond just the secondary school space going ahead. So translating some of those lessons, modular lessons, about how AI is going to impact art, how it's going to impact, math, how it's going to impact, history, how it's going to impact different subjects, different industries, to make that widely available for students and teachers who want access to bite-sized pieces of information. There are plenty of nonprofits working in this space right now. In fact, there's something of a gold rush within the nonprofit and the ed tech space to try and help folks think about AI and getting lessons in front of teachers, in front of students. A lot of companies, a lot of entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs are trying to do that well. Some are trying to make money. Some are trying to do that really well. I think, many of us, of course, are looking at ways to integrate learning about AI within our K-12 school curricula, within higher education curricula, within workforce training modules and the like. So you hear how I'm already, integrating a lot of the trainings about AI in my executive trainings. You I gestured just now to some of the work we're doing in the K-12 space and the fact that there are a lot of players doing that. At Stanford and elsewhere, we're not only developing new types of curriculum within AI education, but we're sharing those out publicly so that they'll be available to other teachers and learners who are interested in this space. And look, I work with executives and organizations, as you indicated, in industry and government and philanthropy, all thinking about various approaches as well. I've been fortunate to help train teachers, journalists, and others with global platforms to help advance the public's understanding of AI and AI's impact, help advance learners, teachers. I often speak, to audiences where I can to try and take a deeper look at what's here already on the AI front and what's yet to come. To my mind, this is an incredibly important endeavor, that public-facing dimension that you're asking about. There's so much work to be done on this front, and there are so many people and organizations, good people and organizations, trying to do this work as we speak. I think, Zaid, today's podcast is another one of those examples, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be one of those working in this space, and then to have had this conversation with you today. I think it's absolutely essential, and there's so much more happening in the AI space than we could possibly get to today. So I'm hoping that each of you who are listening today will take it upon yourself to learn a little bit more, to understand that what's going to be coming out over the next 2 years, over the next 2 months, is going to probably transform a lot of what we talked about today. It's going to be pushing pretty quickly, and so keeping up to date, not merely if you have job interests or student interests or teacher interests, but because we're citizens of a world that's going to be shaped by these technologies, that's going to be shaped by the choices that we make today. And so, for all of us, I think whether we're in leadership positions now, whether we're just global citizens, whether we're looking to be more active or more part of shaping that future, that it's our choice, our moment, our set of responsibilities as we look at the rapidly moving pace of AI development, to understand it as best as we can within our given role. None of us has to become an AI technologist or specialist, to help understand, to help learn a little bit more, and then help shape that conversation as global citizens. I hope you'll join me, and I hope this has been a helpful part of your journey. This conversation today has been a helpful part of your journey. Zaid, I thank you for it.
John, thank you so much for joining, and trust me, it was really insightful. In the last, I will request you to give 1 minute message to, since our audience is the university students, educators, business community, and entrepreneurs, startup founders.
Yeah.
So what message would you like to give all of them? Any inspiring message you would like to give them?
Yeah. So, hopefully some of the things I've said already today have been inspiring to you, and will encourage you to think more about your role within this moment in history, this unique moment in history. I think for me, what I want to do is I want to acknowledge that, with around AI, and related technologies, around this revolution in human-centered AI that we're pushing for, there's good reason to be nervous. And there's a healthy approach to that, which is going to recognize that there are potential downsides here that we must avoid. And yet, the possibilities for positive impact, for global sharing in the benefits of AI are also real. And it would be in the long run, I think, we would rightly judge ourselves harshly if we did not take this moment in history as a unique set of responsibilities that we must shoulder and bear for ourselves who are on the planet today, and for generations to come, to look squarely at the challenge that we have before us, to say that there are ways that we can help increase the odds of the positive impacts of this revolution, that there are important ways in which we can decrease the harms, and that it's our responsibility as this first generation wrestling with some of the most complicated issues around some of the most powerful technologies that humanity has ever created. It's an incredible challenge. It's an incredible moment. And it's one that I hope you'll join me in taking up as we look to build a future that's better for all of us where we can.